in English, because I think Ben will be happy to. Otherwise, we'll probably go to Dutch.
Don't mind. Well, the thing is, if you're going to post it on your Dutch, just the Dutch group, then Dutch will be fine. If it's also something that I'm going to post on, if we're planning to also to post it on my channel, then English probably would be better. So
let's do it in English. That's fine. That works for me. Awesome. We'll do the recording. We'll post that. We'll give you the video link so you can post it.
Yep.
On the video file. So Mitchell, let's give it a few minutes and maybe actually start. Then we'll start. You can start the recording, right, Mitchell?
I am just looking at my settings here, and it says the recording is unavailable. It's grayed out.
What the hell?
Let me figure out if I can capture my screen and audio in another way. One second.
Snag it. Yeah, that's weird. It's grayed out. Look. Yeah. Anyway, so Ben, thanks for joining this group, and it's definitely getting busier, so that's good. All right. So, quick introduction of the group that actually is hosting the meeting. So, we are the Dutch Canadian Business Club of Calgary. We are a group of Dutch, professionals and entrepreneurs of Dutch heritage, Dutch descent, let's put it that way. We put on in-person events, social, but also webinars and seminars. This webinar is a part of a series which is called Dutch Expertise, in which we try to highlight things which the Dutch are known for and do really well. We already had a seminar about Dutch cycling infrastructure, for example. We might do a webinar or seminar eventually about water engineering. That's something we're really good at. But the other thing we're really, really good at is dance music. Ben was the first grandmaster of Dutch dance. And since then, many, many DJs have topped the international charts from the Netherlands. So we asked Ben to give us a presentation about how he got rolled into this job, how he got so good at it, and how the Dutch dance scene evolved. So Ben, without further ado, why don't you take it away? Can you make Ben a presenter, Mitchell? You should be able to make him a presenter.
I will have a look. Let's see.
So just giving a test. So
you can definitely hear me.
But at the moment, it still switches back and forth to who's making sound. So
yep. So let's just make sure that we make you a presenter.
Test 1 2 1 2.
No, I think there's something wrong here with my account, because we have recorded these sessions before, and I don't see any option to make other people presenters.
That's dumb. Do you have a slide deck by any chance, Ben, that you were going to go through?
What?
Did you have a slide deck, or were you just going to talk about things?
The thing is that, and I'm checking that at this moment to also see if I can do a screen share, which I presume I can do. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, you should be able to do a screen share.
Yeah, let me see. Yeah, I can do a screen share. So that shouldn't be a problem. Let's just do that, and hopefully, when I start doing that, it will also keep focused on my screen. So
yep.
So that works. Let me get this out of the way. Yes. Yes, I'm not sure if you only see my screen now, or if you also see a little miniature of the.
We see you, and we see your desktop.
Okay. So, well, let's just start at the beginning. Let's just start at the very, very beginning. I used to go out with my friends back in 1978, and we had a club called Juicy Lucy in Nijmegen, discotheque, and it was just called Juicy Lucy, and didn't give it a second thought. And there was nothing strange or nothing strange going on. It was just a club where stuff was played from Earth, Wind, and Fire to Golden Brown, the Stranglers, and everything in between. And a guy from the bar was putting up some music between like 6 and 8 on the Sunday. It was open from 3 in the afternoon till at night. But the DJ left for about 2 hours to get something to eat. And then the guy behind the bar was just putting up songs. But he was also bartending. So he was running back and forth, and, you know, needles were scratching the records and all that kind of stuff. And I just asked him, would it be okay for me to fill in these 2 hours? You know, if not for anything else, it'll preserve your equipment, because I love music, but just as much I love the technology and everything that comes with it to making the music. So yeah, that was fine. So I did, and as I was a regular of that venue, I knew what the hits were, and I just played the smooth hours, and I actually was allowed to just continue playing, and I got offered the Friday at that location. So that was my first gig. Basically, just stepping in and starting to play music. And that was the first DJ gig I got, and it went on from there. Played in another club after that, and in the third club, which was the Emperor Charles Keizer Karel Club in Nijmegen, in my hometown. That was kind of the next step in how all this evolved, because some of the people that were visiting the club were Bernard Oates and Rob van Schaik, and they together formed The Limit. And a couple of years later, they had quite a hit with Say Yeah. But back then, they just were visiting the club, this club I was DJing in, because what I was playing in the club, usually, you know, it took like 2 to 3 months before any of that stuff kind of made its way into the charts. So for them, it meant that if they would visit my club and if they would hear what I was making, what I was DJing, they could go back in the studio, take their time, make the production, bring it out, and it would still be ahead of most of the other imports coming out in the Netherlands. So that was a very convenient way for them to stay up to speed. And they heard the edits I was doing. I was specifically, I made an edit of Don't You Want Me Baby, Human League. And the edit I made was where the guy says what he's saying in the song, and then the girl answered, and then the guy says the next line, and then the girl answers, which is normally not in the regular version, which led them to approach me and ask if I could edit their first production, which was The Limit, She's So Divine. And that's the one I've got lined up here. So I'll play you a part of that. Let me see. How's the sound, by the way, if I play this?
Oh, that's absolutely fine. Quick question, Ben. So when you say edits, was it physically cutting and like cutting and like gluing pieces of tape together?
Yeah.
Is that how?
Yeah. So it's done on a tape machine, and as we have all that stuff here, let me see if I can look that up as well. Let's say 80. See if I got a little video of that. Help. And within this little thing, I might take a second to look some stuff up, which makes it easier to explain what is going on. Let me see where I am. Sounds interesting.
Yeah, you got I think Mitchell had his little kid babbling in the background.
Kind movie. Let's see what comes up. Yes. Here we go. That's a tape machine. That is the so you cue, and then after you cued, you mark, So that's where the beat is. You move it ahead to the editor, and then you edit the tape, the next tape, the next piece, which should follow the piece you already had recorded, which is there. They are positioned next to each other. And then there is some AGFA splicing tape, which is a kind of special adhesive tape, which doesn't stretch. So these edits, even if the tape is like, and that's how an edit is made. So it's an actual edit made into a tape. And as I was saying, the splicing tapes used for that is of such a quality that even tapes that have been edited 30, 40 years ago, they will play perfectly. And that was what I did with the first version of my first edit I made for The Limit. They had recorded a vocal version, an instrumental version, some extra drum parts, and then I edited, sequenced all these parts together. I won't play the whole 12-inch, but I'll play a couple of parts. So starting off with, the intro. So, and by editing, I could extend that and, gradually let it build up into the next part. Then, go into the song, have the verse, have the chorus, coming to a middle eight, coming back there, and even doing some editing effects in there. So what you're seeing here are a couple of these beats, which are then edited together in a specific rhythmic way, making sure that the distance between all the beats are correct, so the timing stays intact, and then you get a little edit like this. So that basically was the first, I'll see if I can just switch back to the stop presenting, see if I can go back. Yes, so that was the first edit I made for a record company, for Rob and Bernard for The Limit. And that same week, I got a second assignment to do a 12-inch version for the Dolly Dots. And the Dolly Dots, the reason why I took on this one, because they just previously had released PS, which really is a good song. I mean, a lot of the Dolly Dots stuff is like a little bit, too lightweight, in my opinion. Not credible enough for the dance floor. It's they've made a lot of hits, but it was just a little bit too
Fluffy.
Too fluffy. Yeah, let's call it fluffy. So they made PS, and I loved PS. And then I got the opportunity to do the follow-up. And that was my second assignment. And pretty fast after that, I got my first production gig. And this was all to do with the fact that the guys from The Limit, they had their publishing with the company of the Two Peters. The company of Two Peters, they had the connections, which later led to the productions of Forrest, Rock the Boat, and all that kind of stuff. And they also had the connections to Lex Harding, who ran Radio Veronica back then. So that was how all that was connected in Hilversum. And me doing this production, this edit for Rob and Bernard, got the attention of the Two Peters, which then led to doing a production actually with the vocals of Forrest on there, which was Rock the Boat. But at that time, he wasn't able to perform the track because he was still kind of tied into a band. He was part of a band. And so they came up with Julius Green, just someone who would perform it on TV. But Julius Green, if you look it up, there is a version of Julius Green of Rock Your Baby. Just know that everything you hear, it's Forrest on there. So we did that first production, and then we did a second, which was Rock the Boat, and Rock the Boat just turned out so fine. We said to Forrest, man, we do appreciate your loyalty to the band, but we think this is going to be big, and I think it's in all of our best interest if you perform it, because you can actually perform it, you can do it. You can just step on stage and sing it just as good as it's been recorded on tape. And we think it's going to be a big hit. And that was the second production we did, which was then Forrest Rock the Boat, which did become a big hit. And so that's how I kind of went from just being a DJ into making my first edits in tape, as you saw, actually by editing, by cutting the tape, and getting into the first production things. I can go on and on because this whole thing is like one thing leads to another.
So was it a full-time job at that point? Were you already like was that your job at that point?
I was in school.
You were still in school.
I was in school. Yes, I was. When Forrest Rock the Boat happened, it was 1982, and when all these 12-inch versions started to happen, I was still in school, and I had the Wednesday morning off. So Wednesday mornings, Wednesday school didn't start until about 1:15. So Wednesday mornings was my drive to Baren, place near Hilversum, where the vinyl was cut. And I lived just a couple of hundred meters from where my school was. And, when I would arrive late, why are you late? Well, I had a little bit of a traffic jam near Hilversum. And they thought it was, I was just, kidding them on or, taking the mickey out of them. But that were the Wednesdays for me, driving back and forth to Baren, doing the vinyl cutting, and then back into school. And the school was a technical, like a bachelor degree for electronics. That was the direction I was going into, because again, it's not just the music I love, but I also love all the technology, all the hardware, and all the later years also all the software that comes with making productions and all that kind of stuff.
Cool.
So I'll let you ask the next question, and we'll just go from there, because
Okay,
I can go on and on. But
oh yeah, I believe so. Yeah, so and we want to keep it a bit on the short. We don't want to go on and on all the. We love to hear you talking quite sure. So we're talking early '80s. You're getting your first mixes in. So when did you get to the radio? So when did the mixes start happening on Veronica Radio? Because I do remember hearing those when I was in high school.
Yeah. So as I said, that tied together. Company of the Two Peters, Rob and Bernard of the Limit having their publishing there, and that led to Forrest Rock the Boat. But the Two Peters, Pieter van Bodegraven and Peter Schoonhoven, they also played golf, and they played golf with Lex Harding. And that's why I mentioned that. That's how that all ties together. So, and then I wasn't there with the conversation, but the conversation was a bit like, so I hear about this new style of DJing where the DJ doesn't talk. And the Two Peters said, well, Ben does that. Ben does that because, Rob and Bernard go to his club and they hear him doing these non-stop rhythm mixes. And if you want to talk to someone about that, you'd have to talk to Ben. And so I got that call, and I was very fortunate to be a nerd and to be interested in the technical side of all this, because that meant that if they would have asked somebody else who maybe also would have been able to make the DJ mixes in the club, then that person might have been able to do the DJ mixes, but he might not be able to record it to the quality standard that was required by the NOS. The NOS had incredible, crazy high recording standards, and it was even kind of like not that it was a union, but a kind of like a union situation, that anything broadcasted on Dutch radio needed to be either recorded / engineered by the NOS technicians, or it needed to be recorded or with the NOS studios. And I was the first exception on Dutch radio to be allowed to hand in a tape and to supply my mixes like that. The first idea was let's see if we can get some SL1200s in the NOS studios, but obviously before that was allowed.
So you had, now you're immediately nerding out, and I'm okay, sure. But what's the SL1200?
Okay,
what is that?
An SL1200 is a Technics turntable, and the Technics turntable, that model, the SL1200 MK2, became the industry standard for all DJs. It just basically became the DJ turntable from, I'd say, 1978, 1979. I found them in a shop in 1980, literally between the toasters and the dishwashers, and I really loved the design. And the beautiful design, beautiful dust cover with this beautiful kind of bubble on there, and it had a pitch fader, and I thought that must be handy, for adjusting the pitch. That pitch fader, that must be handy because it's very visual. You can see what's going on. Must be handy. So remember, we're talking about 1980, so there was no disco scene, there was no DJ scene, there was no internet, and there was no trends, there were no influencers. So if you came across a turntable like that, in my case, being a nerd and appreciating it at face value without having any other people talking about this turntable, this was the turntable for me to start DJing on, and it just happened to turn out to be the industry standard. So I thought, let's have the NOS purchase 2 SL1200 turntables, and I can do the mixes in the studio. So they tested the turntables, and the result was they didn't start fast enough, because the EMT turntables they had in the studio in Hilversum, they start so quickly. It takes about, I don't know, maybe like 3 or 4 centimeters on rotation, and they're up to speed, which the SL1200s cannot. So within the NOS, can you please buy 2 SL1200s? Yes, we look into them, and if they're good enough, then we can do that. And 2 weeks later, the verdict came back: they don't start fast enough. So we said, that doesn't matter, because that's not how they are used. They are used with a slip mat. You hold the record, you cue the record, and you let it go. Okay, I see. So how fast it actually starts up is not relevant, because the turntable is already spinning, and you just let the record go and it will work. Okay, we see. Okay, we'll get back to you. 3 weeks later, no, we can't buy them because they don't start fast enough. Really.
Old school.
Yeah. So that was the moment where I had to hand in my tapes, and by then I was already delivering masters to, for record production. And being the nerd I already was, I knew how loud the tape should be recorded, and I knew about test tones, and I knew basically whatever was needed to deliver this tape to the NOS, and they accepted the quality. That was fine. So, and that is how In the Mix got on Dutch radio, and how I was allowed to make In the Mix at home and drive the tape to the studio, and it then got played on Friday night. And another thing was, these tapes were incredibly expensive. So you're talking about 85 or 90 guilders per big reel, per was it 10.5-inch reel. So I also then wanted to record my In the Mix shows in one take, because if I would make a mistake, I would have to edit the tape. And you can have a couple of edits in tape, but the fewer the better, because the tapes were so expensive. I had to reuse them again. Otherwise, with paying for gasoline, I wouldn't even have made a penny.
You weren't reimbursed for this, or was it just pure
I
exposure?
was. Yes, I was. But if that meant that I had to buy 2 new tapes every week,
Yeah.
then there was basically nothing left. And that's why I needed to reuse the tapes, and I needed to make sure that, as few edits, as few interruptions in the tape as possible. So that's how In the Mix started. And that's how there was a notice on the wall in the studio saying that Ben Liebrand was exempt from the NOS rule and was allowed to play his tapes. It's not something you could get easily away with, because all the tapes in the studio were this old kind of pink shade of Agfa tape, whilst the tape I was using was black BASF 911. So anybody walking in the studio could immediately see, is this an NOS tape or isn't it an NOS tape? So yeah, that's why you need a special
Cool.
permit to be allowed to do that.
So did it also lead to you actually getting more DJ gigs, where you're then starting to be asked to start playing different clubs at that point?
I actually all those years, I always had a residency at a club. So I was playing at the Keizer Karel club in Nijmegen, and I played there until I think 89, nearly 90, and then I moved to another club in Germany called the Hippodrome, near the German town of Cologne, and was a resident there. And I've just done residencies, and it wasn't until 2004 that I changed from, I kind of went away from being a resident at a specific venue to playing gigs all over the place. So that was only in 2004, and up till then only residencies. So every weekend in the same club with my audience.
Which means that you also had to every week had to come up with new ways of actually mixing the songs in and getting the new songs played and stuff like that. So that must, like, how much prep work goes into a set like that? I'm really curious, because you'll play for like 4 to 6 hours. So how much prep work do you do before you play a set like that?
Back then, I would go to Amsterdam nearly every weekend. So nearly every Saturday, I would go to Amsterdam and go to Rhythm Import and Atalos Records, get my records, come home. And what I would do is I had a timer, a stopwatch, and like a counter. And I would actually count a full minute what the BPM was, because I found that, there are some tricks. Count it for 15 seconds, multiply it by 4. But if you then 1 beat off, then suddenly you're 4 beats off, multiplying it by 4. So very diligently counting for a full minute and noting all the BPMs on the tracks, putting them in my record box for the evening. And so that would be the Saturday. And then the week following that, I would have, because the club was closed throughout a couple of days of the week, I would have time to take the records back home and prepare the In the Mix show. And after the In the Mix show was done, the records went back to the club again. So, but it was nearly every week new records, and which also is a nice moment to mention that a lot of the guys and girls becoming DJs now are becoming DJ because of being a DJ. Yeah, being a DJ, being on stage and waving your hands and making the crowds crazy. And back then, it was purely my passion for sharing the music I loved with as many people as possible. That was the goal. That was the drive. And why the mixing? The mixing was not because of the mixing, because of, hey, look at me, I'm mixing, because nobody knew what the hell I was doing. People were dancing on the dance floor, and before they knew it, they were into the next record. But if you would ask them, how did that happen? Nobody would be able to explain. So the mixing was to lure you on the dance floor with the song you knew, and then mix it into that song which I bought that afternoon in Amsterdam, that brand new song, Susie Lane Harmony, Lip Sync, Funky Town, or whatever I came back from Amsterdam, and lure you on the dance floor with the song you knew, and then mix it into whatever I want to introduce to you. And if I did it in such a smooth way that the people on the dance floor never missed a beat, that was the perfect way to introduce new material to my audience. That was mixing. That was what mixing was about. That was what it was for. Not about showing off, being able to mix, but purely as a functional part of keeping the evening flowing, getting the dance floor going.
So at what point in time did the pluggers start to bug you? Hey, Ben, we got this new dance record. Could you put it in your set? Did it ever happen? Did it start happening at one point?
No, because the pluggers, they would be in Hilversum plugging to the radio DJs, but I would be the DJ that would arrive at the studio, 1:30 at night on a Friday, deliver my tape, and then head back. And I would make my selection in the import stores, because basically still then, whatever was going in Holland, whatever was going on, those pluggers with whatever they would want to plug to me, they would be 3 months late. So
Okay,
it was different situation.
Cool. So when did you feel that you started to inspire, that other people started following your style, that it became a thing for DJs to do what you did? Like, did that happen in the 80s already? Did that come later?
Yeah, the funny thing is that there is a huge, insanely well-known club in Amsterdam, which did very well for a very long time, called the IT.
Yep.
And the IT is heralded as fun fact, the IT is heralded as one of the most innovative clubs in Amsterdam at that time, for sure. But Manfred Langer, the guy who started the IT in Amsterdam, was a customer at the Keizer Karel Club in Nijmegen and heard what I was playing there and heard how I was mixing there and took that as a concept back to Amsterdam and started the IT. So whatever the IT in the years, however famous it became afterwards, the idea of what the selection, what was played, and how it was mixed, Manfred Langer took from Ben Liebrand in this little club in Nijmegen called the Keizer Karel Club.
But he never asked you to come play in Amsterdam?
Isn't that sour?
It's a little bit, isn't it?
Isn't that sour? And I mean, a lot of stuff happened in Amsterdam, and I know a lot of books have been written about everything that goes on in Amsterdam, and they kind of present it in a way that they invented the whole shebang. Whilst no, whatever.
It's just a little bit of bitterness there.
There is, because whatever they were doing in Amsterdam, I was doing that from 1980, from the year 1980 on.
Nijmegen is the province. Nobody knows what happens in the province, man.
True. And that's also a funny thing which you don't realize, that you see, you have Nijmegen, and see you have Amsterdam, you have Rotterdam, and you have Detroit, and you have Los Angeles, and you have San Francisco, and you have New York. What I have found out in the last couple of years is that you have these people that are heralded to be the originators in certain genres, but the fact is that these are all local heroes, because back in 1980 you didn't know what was going on 2 towns over. You just didn't know. Exactly. And us being playing music in Nijmegen, when we were done, myself and my friends, we would drive to Utrecht and go to Cartouche in Utrecht, have a nice satay there, and have a nice couple of dance tunes there, and then drive back home. But what I'm trying to say is that what people don't realize is, for a lot of these things, there is not a single originator. There are many originators who have started and who have become heroes in their own regions, and then later history and time will tell when exactly what was happening. But to give you an example, I made the Studio 57 dance album And after I made the Studio 57 dance album, I found out that it was inspired by Studio 54 in New York. So I never had heard about Studio 54 until I made the Studio 57 dance album, because that was not locally in
Nope,
my
that's
field of vision back then.
pretty much the most famous club in North America in the 70s.
Yeah.
Were they actually also doing things like that? Were they also mixing? Do you know what happened in clubs like in
Yeah. Yes, they were mixing because the guy that introduced me to mixing in the Queen in Gennep, which was like 1978, was called Huip Luiten, and he was a DJ, a Dutch DJ, and he had been to New York and he had heard the DJs mixing music, so he brought that back. And when he was playing in the Queen in Gennep, which was a beautiful discotheque, for all the people that know, what is it called again? The big club in Amsterdam on the Rembrandtplein.
Escape?
Escape, yes. All the people that know the Escape, there was a discotheque like that in a little village called Gennep, a little bit below Nijmegen. A converted movie theater with laser, with neon on the ceiling, like a version of what people know to be the Escape, also existed in Gennep. And he came back from the States and he played in that club. And we were visiting the club because it was a proper discotheque. It had, they could play video clip back then. I'm talking 1978. Playing video clips from a Sony U-matic on a whole series of professional Barco monitors along the dance floor. Very sophisticated back then. And so I love the discotheque for what it was. It was the living and breathing, the whole thing. It was the real thing. It was the whatever what you dream of. The Queen in Gennep was that club. And Huip Luiten was playing there. And the only thing I noticed in the beginning was that he was playing pop music too fast. And I couldn't understand why he was playing pop music too fast. And then I noticed that one kind of went rhythmically into the next. And that was basically the first DJ transition I heard, because I noticed that pop music was running way too fast. And that's also what I mean with mixing back then. People on the dance floor didn't have a clue what you were doing. They didn't know what it meant to spin up a record, or to adjust the pitch, or to start it at a specific point and to wait for a specific moment to cross into, to make the crossfade from one track into the next. And mixing, the early days.
So what I'm really curious about, so like the Dutch DJs, which became really famous, like Armin van Buuren, DJ Chesto, they're not really necessarily mixing, right? They're not taking other songs and mixing together. Are they generating their own stuff? Are they reinterpreting it? Like how did that come about? That switch from like mixing what you did to like DJs actually kind of being the creators of new music. Well, is that also something that was inspired by what you did by the editing stuff?
Yeah, the thing is that when In the Mix started, I have heard numerous examples, and there's also on my website on librand.com/inspired, librand.com/inspired, and it shows a whole bunch of DJs, including Chesto, Armin van Buuren, Olaf Bosowski, Ferry Korsten. For all of them, the first moment to be introduced to mixed music was Ben Liebrand in the Mix on Radio Veronica. And I didn't know that back then. I was just making my mixes. There was no feedback. There was no feedback from Radio Veronica. I would send in the track list, and people that would request the track list would get a copy, but I never got to hear how many copies they had to send out. So there was no feedback. But in later years, I have learned that whole group of guys got into music, got into DJing because of Ben Liebrand in the Mix. And from 1985 on, the Grandmix, which was kind of, the best 100 dance tracks from the year. And I'm emphasizing dance tracks because if you listen back to these old Grandmixes, you're like, oh, these are all the hits. They've become hits. They've become classics, when you're looking back. But back then, those were the dance tracks, including Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer and Slave to the Rhythm and stuff that goes a little bit into the new wave direction. Those were the dance tracks. And all these guys were inspired by In the Mix. And the only reason I found out is because when we had plans moving to Canada, I needed a degree in music to qualify for our visa here. And part of that degree, normally you would write a paper about what you hope to achieve in your field of interest. And in my case, it was kind of the other way around. I was asked to write a portfolio about what I had achieved in my field of interest. And so I sat down and I typed in Google, inspired by Ben Liebrand. And lo and behold, one site after the other, Gesto came by, and I knew Armin van Buuren because, he was already a friend of mine for several years back then. And I saw all these names coming by. And that was the first time, I'm talking about 2005. That was the first time I realized, and I actually call it investigated for my portfolio, who was actually inspired by these early In the Mix shows and these early Grandmixes. And that's how that influence came. And part of me evolving in this music business was going from just making edits, then adding on to the edits, then adding bass lines, and then slowly going from editing tape to adding to the production up to the point where I would be doing a complete new production. And that is now also kind of the standard with DJs, with the professional DJs, with Chesto, with Armin van Buuren. And then there is a clear division between the DJs. You'll have the DJs that love the DJing, but really can't be bothered by the technical side. So those would be the DJs that would put their name on a record while somebody else is actually producing the record. And then you have the other kind of DJ that is a nerd just like me, Armin van Buuren, for example, and he's also very interested in the whole technical part of it. And those would become the DJs that would actually also produce their own music and produce their own remixes. And so there are two kinds of DJs. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, because a DJ who is not interested in music can sometimes even have a more objective view on a track, because he doesn't hear timing mistakes. He doesn't hear voices being out of tune. He just takes the whole thing and thinks like, yeah, this will be a hit on my dance floor. Whilst a nerd like me, I never liked Vanilla Ice, Ice Ice Baby, because his timing sucked, and the sample they used in the beginning had so much rumble in there, I just couldn't enjoy it anymore. So, everything has its pro and cons. So, yeah,
stuff. No, that's pretty cool. So the first time I personally remember hearing like something close to like the modern dance is at the Belgian New Beat that came out in the late 80s. You remember that?
Yeah.
So would you say that was at the start of like the nader dance, the lowlands dance revolution, like from like the modern dance type thing, like house type thing? No. Am I totally wrong? Probably off base there, but I was just curious.
No, absolutely not. I mean, it was looking back, it was an absolute gimmick, and like the guys who did it and were quite famous with that, they had a good run, but it was basically having a proper record and playing it at 33 RPM rather than 45, which gave it a kind of weight, but it was more, I don't know, it was more hype than actual whatever. And there are a lot of fans of that, which is totally fine. But the stuff in the Netherlands, I think I very much feel that a lot of stuff in the Netherlands was trying to copy what was going on in the United States, but not exactly getting there. And there are a couple of examples. For example, American Gypsy with I'm Okay, You're Okay, which was produced by the same producer as the Dolly Dots. That was absolutely top notch and absolutely convincing Dutch music. Spence, Get It On, track from those days, was absolutely credible funk dance music. And but even I myself, I remember that around the time of Forrest Rock the Boat. Forrest was an American. He had a fantastic voice. Accentless English, obviously, because it was his native language. But we also did a version of Rock the Boat. No, not Rock the Boat. Of Boogie Nights, the Heatwave track, and we did a version with La Fleur, and it did very well. It really did very well. But my mother is English, Scottish actually, and you can hear the you can hear the accent there. It's not 100% convincing, and finding vocalists, finding guys and girls who could sing in proper English without a Dutch accent, man, it was an absolute struggle. And so that's why, for example, I'm jumping in time now. I've recently done a couple of productions with OJAM, a group based around Arnhem. Well, they come from all over the place, but the recordings are made in Arnhem. And these guys, their vocal performances are really top notch and 100% convincing, credible. And I just wish I had vocals to work with from that quality back then. So rewinding, Dutch, all the Dutch dance stuff being done back then, it was an attempt of doing proper, credible American dance, funk, disco music, but a lot of the times it kind of missed. It didn't have the credibility.
Yeah. So when did the house maker really start taking off, from your perspective, the house music?
Well, the thing is that as I was a resident DJ, that means that you actually play all the genres. So if you profile yourself of being a house DJ or a hip hop or trance or whatever, then you kind of specialize in a direction. But being a resident DJ at a venue, that would mean you would start the night off with something slow, then you get into more energy, then you get into stuff, house, acid house or whatever. And when the night progresses and you get later in the evening and also later in the 90s, you would go into trance. So I would play anything and everything. And also part of me doing this all these years, I would actually have to go back to episodes of In the Mix and kind of find out when I actually started playing certain records. Because if you're actually being the DJ and if you're actually doing all the productions and doing all the remix, you're having a different week. You're not keeping track and you're not bookkeeping of what is happening when. You're just in this flow, and the stuff that needs to be done this week, you're happy by the end of the week if you get it done. And even my weekends were the preferred Saturday, Sunday were the preferred days for me to work, because then I wouldn't get disturbed so much by phone calls. So, and if you imagine that those are your 7 days in the week, then you don't have time to keep track. You don't have,
exactly.
you have a lot of people. You have a lot of people on the sidelines, and they know exactly when this record came out, when that record came out, and God knows what. But those are more, I would say, the bookkeepers of the music history, but not actually the people that were involved in music history or actually made music history.
No, that makes total sense. So talk about music history. So you're saying like you played in the club, you played everything and anything.
Yeah.
So but these days, like when you go back to the Netherlands, you are like you do the disco classics type parties,
Yes.
right? So was there a very specific reason for doing that? When did you make that clear cut?
Yeah. So I told a little bit earlier on that I was a resident DJ up till 2004, and from 2004 I was like, I would love to go around Netherlands and play in different venues, and I had a meeting with Mr. Stutterheim, who did all the ID&T stuff, and I was already working with him, doing all the 3D animations for all the Thunderdome releases. And he knew me as a DJ because, even a DJ Dano, who's totally into hardcore, he also started off with Ben Liebrand in the mix. So that's also what got him going. So anyways, I made an appointment with him, and we sat down at one of the venues at the beach in Zandvoort. And they said, well, I want to play, all over the place in the Netherlands and outside of the Netherlands. And he said something surprising. He said, well, you have a problem. And the problem is that you can do a perfect hip hop set. You can do a perfect dance classic set. You can do a perfect house set, acid set. You can do a perfect trance set. But that means that nobody knows when to call you, because you can do all of it. And because you can do all of it, your phone won't ring because people don't know when to call Ben Liebrand. So what's going on, and we're talking in 2004 now, what's going on at the moment, he said, is that you have these young guys who will play house tracks till 6 a.m, and they'll play trance tracks until 6 a.m. I don't even know if you want to do that. Don't even know if you want to play, till 6 a.m. anymore. He said, but even more important, the way you play dance classics and the way you can mix dance classics and the way you have your grip on that and you know how to do that, there are very, very, very few people who can do that. So I would suggest that if you want to become a DJ who gets booked all over the place, you have to profile yourself as a specific DJ. And my suggestion would be profile yourself for dance classics, because I don't know anybody else who could mix it the way that you do. And it would also mean that you wouldn't have to play until 6 a.m, because these dance classics parties don't go till 6 a.m. So it was a kind of, I don't know, kind of a sobering conclusion that being able to do all these genres didn't help me at all, because I needed to focus myself on one genre, and that was then the dance classics. And I took it from there. And to keep it interesting for myself, I started making the set more and more complex, adding more a cappellas, adding more this, adding more that, try to find the perfect blends with tracks that kind of have a 1 + 1 is more than 2 effect, mashup parts in my set. And by making it complex for myself, I keep it interesting for myself. And the laptop is in the other room. Just to let you know, I don't even have a setup with players here. I just have a little laptop on which I prepare my DJ sets, and then write everything to the USB sticks. And that basically means that if it were an old-fashioned record box, that would basically mean that I would have sequenced everything I'm planning to do for a set, that I don't have to waste time scrolling or looking for songs, but I kind of have it in in sequence. I can still jump, I can still alter, I can still do variations, but if I'm doing a very fast set with lots and lots of records in a very short time, then that's the way for me to build my set. And because I'm doing it in such a fluent way, accomplishes two things. One thing is that if you are a nerd, if you're a DJ, if you're a colleague DJ, you really enjoy yourself because you notice and you hear all the combinations which fit together so perfectly. It gives you a chill down your back. And at the same time, it's done in such a smooth and fluent way that it is not interfering with all the other people on the dance floor, which are the other 98% who don't give a rat's ass about mixing. They only want to hear the great songs they know from back in the day. And I am then able to play all these memory moments for them in such a smooth way that the mixing part of it is supporting what I'm doing, but not the headliner, because the music is the headliner. And I just managed to have found, with all my nerdiness, a balance in making a music set that can be very much appreciated by the nerd and colleague DJs, and just as much appreciated by all the people on the dance floor who don't even care about what mixing is.
Cool.
So
I want to go back quickly to the subject of the webinar. So why are Dutch DJs the best in the world? Because you were saying, like, in the 80s, the Dutch were kind of struggling to put out good disco. Like, I personally can think of Spargo. They had an American singer.
Those weren't the DJs. Those were just people doing productions. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, productions. But then as tango went by, when the 90s came along and then the 2000s, the Dutch DJs really rose to prominence.
Yes.
So what is it in the Dutch dance culture that makes them so good?
Well, obviously this sounds crazy to say something like that from, about yourself, but history has shown that so many DJs started with Ben Liebrand in the mix. That was the trigger. That was the inspiration. That was even Armin van Buuren, when he heard the Weerbericht, the weather forecast mini mix, he was like, I want to be able to do that. That was directly the inspiration. And a lot of those DJs then later on, for example, got the chances to play their mixes with Ferry Maat in the Doorstarters section in the Soul Show. But although they were able to play their mixes there, the reason why they got into music, the reason why they wanted to learn mixing, was because Ben Liebrand and his mixes, which, if you Google it, if you look on websites,
I believe it. Yep.
So that is yes. So looking back, history says,
yep,
I played a big part. I didn't know it back then, and
that's
I wasn't planning it, but
yep. So that's a trigger point, right? But
that's one trigger point.
Yep,
yeah, trigger point, which is very interesting and very important, is that at Pioneer in the Netherlands, you have a guy called Jeroen Groenendijk.
Okay.
And Jeroen Groenendijk has always supported the Pioneer players. Jeroen Groenendijk was the guy that made sure that on every important festival, the latest players would be available. They would be there. These players would be there with the huge Pioneer logos on the side, and he was there to make sure that Pioneer was at every important gig, at every important festival. And I think that a lot of credit goes to Jeroen, because he's been instrumental in making the Pioneer CD players the benchmark, the industry standard for DJs after after vinyl ran out. So he is instrumental in solidifying that, and then all the Dutch DJs had the luxury of, wherever they were, being able to play on these beautiful Pioneer CD players, because they were everywhere. And obviously, when they went abroad, they also made sure that on their rider, like a little list of, I need to have this and this and this in place in order for me to do a good set, pioneer was way up there. So also Jeroen Groenendijk, big compliments from myself, and he knows that. I'm a big supporter, and very thankful for him that he was being so supportive and so instrumental in making this DJ standard for me and all the Dutch DJs.
That's really cool. So, is it also they were playing off each other, like Chesto made Armin van Buuren better, and vice versa? Was it also something in the interplay at going on there, or was that, or yeah, it was was there a community that built off each other? Like, is that something that also played a part there?
I think that is something that has obviously happened, yes, but it has happened in a lot of different ways. So you have the DJs that just have fun with each other, but those are the DJs that are already established. So they are already past the point that they feel they have to prove themselves, and they don't mind if the other DJ plays, the big hit of the moment. They don't mind. They're past that point. There's also a category of DJs that plays together with other DJs to kind of see, to kind of grasp their, I don't know, their essence, to kind of grab their ideas and then go back in the studio and use whatever they learned there in their own productions without giving back, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So, and for myself, I again was in a different category. I remember judging at a DJ contest way back in 1984, and the guy came up to me and said, "You stole one of my transitions," and I'm like, "I don't know who you are, and I wouldn't know where I play in the club every weekend. I don't even have time to go to another club. So where would I have heard your
Transition,
yeah, and it pissed me off. And I'll get into the pissing off part a little bit later.
Sure.
It pissed me off, and I then decided I'm not going to listen to other people's mixes, because I just do not want to have some nut job come walking up to me and saying to me, "You stole my transition." So the easiest way to do that is I'm not going to listen to other people's mixes, which obviously prevents that back-to-back thing going on, because you're not going to do that anymore. But at the same time, for me, it resulted in me developing my style. And the way I mix is the way Ben Liebrand mixes. And it's 100% Ben Liebrand, because I never go harvesting ideas from other people, because way back I decided for myself, not going to do that, and I'm just want to steer clear from that so clearly. And the best way was just not listening to other people's mixes. Now we're coming to the pissed part, being pissed off. And that's something actually I discovered about myself just a couple of years ago, maybe just 3 or 4 years ago, that if I would ever be tested by a psychologist, they would determine that I am on the spectrum.
Aren't we all?
Yes. Aren't we all? Aren't we all? And the more you realize that, and if I look back at also the 80s, going to Veronica, delivering my mix, and there would be some party. Hey, Ben, are you coming along to the party? And occasionally I would go along to the party, and there was this party, and I was just like, as Armin says, like a fish out of the water. Like, what the hell am I doing here? I am here. There's a DJ booth there, but I'm not in the DJ booth. What the hell am I doing here? And the more I look back to those days, I realized that I also back then, I was very much on the spectrum, very much have a hyper focus on what I was doing. And really also considered other people around me to be noise rather than helpful. And a clear example is the following. if I'm doing a production and I need to record vocals, I know how important it is to get the best out of a vocalist. I'm very aware of that. And it's also, part of doing so many productions with Bernard and Rob from The Limit. They taught me that if the singer or a girl singer, male, female singer, wherever, if the singer is in front of the microphone, you have to have the perfect atmosphere to have them give the best they can at that moment, and not be how do you call it? Not be coy, not be not be afraid to say, "I'm sure I can do that take even better." Record me once again. I'm sure I can do it better. So be very honest, because when you're back in your car driving home, the regret you have then, like, fuck, I could have done that better, is of no use. So it's very important, singer in front of the microphone, to get the best there and then. And at the same time, thinking back in these years, I couldn't wait for them to bugger off, so I could be back in my bubble and continue to hyper focus on whatever I needed to do. And it's so odd that looking back, I recognize so many of these things that clearly, I was clearly on the spectrum. I am clearly on the spectrum, being in my bubble, totally unaware that I was in my bubble, and also so much stuff was just going by me, and I just didn't notice it. And at the same time, when I got into a situation, for example, being in a club but not DJing, I felt so out of place. And being in a situation where something happens, where I'm like, a situation where it's so clear to me, like 1 + 1 is 2, and then as something happens where 1 + 1 is 5, it throws me off, because it's like, no, this can't be happening. This is not okay. This is not right. And yeah.
You still turned into a very well-adjusted human being.
Well, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, but as you say, everybody's somewhere on the spectrum.
Yep.
And for me, if somebody's hearing this and somebody's recognizing this with himself, the important takeaway from this is, if you know that this is the case, it's fine, because the most important thing is realizing that this is the case and making sure that you are not putting a burden on people around you by being the way you are. Because being in a bubble means that a lot of important stuff also can just miss you completely.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, because your brain works in a certain way, and then later important stuff happened to be said, and you can't remember it because it just went by you, and that could give the impression that you're not interested in what other people are saying, which is not the case. You are interested, but at that moment in time, there's all this stuff going in your head. And my Brenda coming into the studio, and I'm at work. Would you like a cup of tea? And I'm like, and I'm in this little thing which I need to fix now. And I'm not lying. I'm not kidding. At that moment, I cannot give you an answer. I could not give you an answer. Do I do or do I not want a cup of tea? So realizing that this is the case can now help me snap out of that situation, take a step back, look at the whole picture, and
Talking about tea, my wife just brought me some. She didn't even ask.
Magic. And if it weren't for your wife and my Brenda, we would all be drying out. And same Harry here is also chugging away some nice things which he's just got from his wife.
Yeah, exactly. So we covered a lot of ground here, and I think it's great. I would like to open up the floor to other people in the call if they have any questions, because we have some people here. So any questions from anybody else on the call?
You have to unmute the microphone.
Yeah, you got to unmute yourself if you want to talk. And anybody can unmute themselves. We haven't muted anybody.
And again, just what I said a little bit earlier, just like with the singer, it's no use having regret later not having asked the question now. So if you have a
Exactly.
question, ask the question.
So Harry, you shouldn't be. You're bound to have a question, fellow
Harry,
fellow
Harry knows
fellow
everything.
DJ.
Harry knows everything. Harry's still muted.
He's still looking for the mute button.
Yes.
I think.
I found him. Yeah, no, I know Ben now for a couple of years in person. So he told me a lot of stories already in the past. So not much new for me, but it's still interesting, an interesting person to talk about music. Yeah, but not really questions at the moment.
Good.
So Ben, do you have any tips for anybody who wants to go this way, who wants to get into being a DJ or creating music? Any tips for that? Any pointers?
So in I think the first and second year of In the Mix, I also had a second hour on Radio Veronica, which also featured interviews. And what I've learned from talking to all these other DJs is that the path for most DJs goes that they play all the popular stuff, but they do have their own taste. But they play all the popular stuff because all the popular stuff needs to be played in the venue where they are hired to play. But they also have their own personal taste. And for all these DJs, kind of like the red thread going through all these stories is that all these DJs, at some point, at some venue, at some festival, were like, to hell with it. I'm not going to play all the top 40 stuff. I'm to hell with it. I'm just fed up with it. And I want to play my own stuff this evening. And it doesn't matter if I never get booked again here, or if I lose my residency in this club. I just want to play the stuff I really like myself. They play their own set. They play their own favorites. And that is then the defining moment, keeping a dance floor full. And that's when the magic happens, that if they are lucky enough to keep the dance floor going by just playing what they really love themselves, without needing all the hits from, the charts and the top 40 or whatever, that will be the moment where they realize, I have my audience. There is an audience for me. There is an audience that loves the stuff that I do. And that gives you such a boost in confidence that you will have the courage to play another gig where you just play your own stuff. And that is when you are defining yourself as a DJ in whatever genre it may be, and build on that, and you'll become, the next DJ Roog, or the next Tiesto, or the next Armin van Buuren, or whatever. But you need that moment. You need that moment of first being in a club and playing whatever's needed, and then finding the courage, and hopefully that evening finding the audience, which gives you the courage to develop yourself in the direction you are really loving. Because it's no use being a second Ben Liebrand. There's no use being a second Armin. You have to be yourself. You have to identify yourself as being unique, because if you're not unique, you're not going to get booked.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Art, you have a question there.
Yeah. So when you're in Europe, distances are small. Getting invited probably and playing all over the place is easy. Your move to Canada, was that advantageous to you, or you just travel more and get the job done that way?
Moving to Canada, the main reason to move to Canada, there are several reasons, but one of the main reasons was, and I'll get to exactly your question in a bit. One of the main reasons was that time was starting to go by so fast that I blinked my eyes and another 10 years had gone by. And I thought by myself, do I want to have another 10 years of this, or would I like to do something else? And we had family in Calgary, in the Calgary area. So that was kind of a little bit of a safety net of us doing this. By then, everything had gone digital, so that was possible, and that was no problem. So that made it possible for us to move our front door from where it was in the Netherlands to somewhere else. That was one thing, and the other thing was that meeting René Sluis, and that brought up the idea. Let's see if we can find some people and see if we can do a disco night in Calgary, which was basically very difficult for this reason, that if you're talking about an 80s or 90s night in the Netherlands, I just happen to be very influential of what the 80s and 90s were on the dance floor in the Netherlands, without intending it at the time or without planning to do so. But I just happen to be very influential on what 80s and 90s mean on the dance floor in the Netherlands. 80s and 90s in Calgary means Aerosmith, Def Leppard, God knows what other traumatic stuff.
Hair metal.
Yeah. So that meant that we had to see if we could market our dance night in a way that it didn't say 80s or 90s. It couldn't say disco, because disco also had a bad time here in North America, being declared dead in 1980. Another thing which never happened in Europe, never happened in the Netherlands. So we came up with the idea to present our evening by mentioning artist names, and then the people could, distill from these artist names. Okay, this is what I can expect, and we built a great night, and was doing very well in Calgary. And last year, June, René as well as we moved from Calgary to Vancouver Island, and we are looking into starting a night up here. The funny / sad part is, it's very tough to get the CDJ players here, because Canada unfortunately does not have a Jeroen Groenendijk, did not have that person that promoted these players to be the industry standard. So DJs here in Canada are mixing on anything and everything, from a laptop to whatever they can get their hands on. But the Pioneer CDJ, the professional CDJ series, are not a standard in Canada, and are clearly not a standard here on the island, because so far we haven't been able to rent 4 at the same time. So
when you play in Calgary, do you actually rent those wheels of steel? Or they're not your own?
In Calgary, it's not a problem, but I don't have my own. I don't have my own players. And also one of the reasons, which you might not imagine, but say if I have CDJ 2000, then the new one comes out, then I would have to buy 4 Nexus, then I would have to buy 4 Nexus 2, and then I would have to buy 4 CDJ 3000s, which
expensive.
It's certainly, if you add all those sets of 4, and basically for me also part of the fun is preparing my set on this little tiny laptop. It's basically like going into the kitchen and selecting all the herbs and all the ingredients for wherever you plan to cook, and then go to the venue, and that's where you cook it. And that's where it turns out, like, did everything that I have in mind pan out the way that I hoped? And that's where is, as the English say, the proof is in the pudding. But I only find out on location with the full dance floor and all the people there. But I don't rehearse any sets here. So
cool. So the question then, you travel over for quite a bit, right? Because I think you fly to the Netherlands twice a month, roughly.
Yeah. No. What I do is once a month, on average, about 10 times a year. I travel to the Netherlands, and then the bookings agency in the Netherlands makes sure that I have a Friday and a Saturday, or a Saturday and a Sunday, or a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So he kind of gathers events from different weekends and sees if he can fit them into one specific weekend. And I'll fly in, and I'll arrive on the Friday morning, do a DJ gig Friday night, Saturday night, maybe even one Sunday, and then fly back on Monday. So that's how that works.
So I have another question for you. So there's lots of DJ software out there these days, right? So like there's the software you can just drop a few MP3s into, and it will mix it for you. Does
Yes.
it mean that has that cheapened the DJ profession? Does it mean it makes it, or is it just lower entry now to actually do that type of stuff?
It is a lower entry, and one of the things you have now with the CDJ players by Pioneer is that you can sync them, that they match the beats automatically. But if you've already been playing with these players for so long, then that is a solution which by then isn't a problem anymore. So I'm not using auto sync. I'm just syncing everything by hand. If you're talking about, does it cheapen the experience? I don't know. I mean,
The profession, not the experience, the profession. Does it mean that?
Well, consider it this way. Does it cheapen the quality of a book if it's written on a word processor or if it's written on a traditional typewriter?
No, exactly. It's still about making the combination of music, right? That's important.
It's still about the music, and I've seen gigs in Calgary right when in 2010 when drum and bass was very popular, and these were all DJs, and they came in with all kinds of gear, all kinds of stuff, and they had a big DJ booth, a big wide booth where they could set up 2 setups at the same time. So a DJ would be playing, and 10 minutes before the next hour, the next DJ would set up on the other side, and he would play a full hour, and with anything and everything. And it really showed that it really doesn't matter with what you're thrilling the audience, as long as you're thrilling the audience. So
Yep, very good point. All right, good stuff. Any other questions from the room? Bart, you're like from deep in the night in the Netherlands. Do you have anything to ask Ben?
Bart is looking for the unmute. Yes.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I was already wondering because we talk a lot, so I already know a lot of stuff. And yes, I was one of the first fans, I think, of In the Mix and the Grandmix. So probably one of my questions is what kind of equipment over all these years that you really like best? Probably the Akai 1500 or.
Yeah, so over the years you have different kind of equipment to do your mixes with, and back in the day of doing the Grandmixes for Radio Veronica, it was 2 SL1200 turntables and my tape deck, and a new set of vinyl. So I would buy all the tracks that needed to be in the Grandmix new, so they didn't have any cracks, they didn't have any distortion, to get the quality as fantastic as possible. Then at a certain point, CD came in, and the whole thing went digital. And then basically it's just the year. It just depends on what year it is. And Bart just mentioned a piece of hardware by Akai, a DD1500, which is like a 16-track digital recorder. I loved it because it would never crash. It would always work, and it would never crash. So talking about making safety copies, you just didn't have to, because it never crashed. Very, very dependable piece of equipment. But over time, the software, it's a software solution. The software I've been using the longest is Ableton. So it's a software solution, and it's basically my Swiss Army knife. I can do anything I need to do in Ableton. And I see a question from Danielle.
Yep. Good. Go ahead.
Danielle.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, I have to say compliments to Ben and Edward for this panel. And my question is about a general question. It's my first time here, and I hope there will be other meetings like this, because it was very, very interesting.
Nice.
And no worries. I'm calling from Italy, actually, but I'm talking as a Swedish student. And my question is, what do you think about the Swedish contribution? I mean, Avicii and Alesso to the Dutch DJ music heritage to Europe, actually and to the world? I mean, do you find there is a contribution from Sweden, and how strong is this connection to Sweden? Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. I think it's absolutely a contribution, and I played all the stuff that came from Sweden a lot in the sets, and it's also featured very much in all the Grandmixes, all of them, Avicii, the whole Swedish House Mafia, and all the separate guys from there, and yes, a very big influence, twofold. One for the great music they did there, and obviously all the music they did was a big boost for the whole EDM genre. And with every genre that goes for EDM, it goes for hip hop, it goes for disco. Obviously, you have all the original stuff, and then obviously you also have a lot of stuff which is cheap copies of the original. And just about for every genre, there will be such cheap copies of what used to be the original that it kind of cheapens the whole genre and cheapens the trance genre, EDM genre, disco genre. So that unfortunately also happens, but all the original guys really love their stuff for the music. And another big influence they had on the whole DJ scene is obviously what happened to Avicii, and the sad circumstances that led to his death. And it was a huge eye opener for a lot of my colleagues, and a huge eye opener that, you know, there is the saying, the show must go on, but yeah, what happened with Avicii, the show, they forced the show to go on way beyond what was reasonable and way beyond what was healthy. And it's so sad that something as sad as his passing needed to happen before DJs and their management became aware of, yeah, I mean, all is nice and all is funny, but there is a limit. There is until here and not further. And I'm hoping that DJs that get caught into that slipstream will have a group around them of people that care for them and not for the money that it generates, and keep him with his feet on the ground, and keep him healthy. So yeah. So the influence is twofold.
Absolutely. So you talk about the coming and going of waves of EDM. The one thing I've noticed in the last few years is that disco made a comeback. Like lots of big artists, like going and grabbing back to the old disco days. I think Beyonce's last album was like a big homage to the early 70s disco, and there's like lots more examples like that. How do you explain that? Is there do you think there's specific explanations for that?
Well, I think the explanation is to be found in that a lot of the disco that was made back in the day, it has so much character. It has so much warmth and character to it. It's like you know, you can have your house styled in a very, very modern way, but there are certain furniture pieces that have so much character to them that they kind of make your room, be it you know, the Barcelona chair, be it whatever well-known architectural furniture pieces. And what you see now is, well, what you've seen for a long time is that if not for anything else, they'll sample something from an old disco track, and that sample will kind of be that Barcelona chair in your way too modern room, but that Barcelona chair will give it the proper ambience, will give it the proper character. And introducing character into a song, yeah, it's very important, because if you're not doing that, and over the last couple of years, a lot of hip hop is being produced with just the 808 drum computer and nothing else, I'm like, yeah, this is becoming disposable music, and music has become disposable in general, very sadly. But this is like the very forgettable music which is being made. And I don't have anything against new music, but at a certain point, you know, if music starts to sound like my first Sony, if I can make that comparison, then yeah. So I think that's one of the reasons, character.
Yeah. So Mitchell, you got a question?
Yeah, I do have a question. This is actually an interesting point where music becomes disposable and technology helps us consuming music in a way that's so overwhelming that it becomes worthless. I like music a lot. Moving to Calgary from Amsterdam, I grew up on house, techno, and hardcore. My tribe doesn't exist here, and interacting with music is hard for that reason. Do you have tips maybe how to curate your own music collection? Are there certain media types that you would recommend, or how to deal with all these streaming services, or maybe just not use them at all? What's your take on that?
Well, the thing is that, and this has happened before, even before Spotify. This has happened right about the time that the first iPhones also came out. A lot of the guys here are from the time that they were doing the paper rounds, so they could buy proper hi-fi equipment and they could start their collection of vinyl. And you would buy albums and you would listen to entire albums from the first track to the last track, flip it over and listen to the entire album. Now, it is way more important for somebody in school to identify himself with a certain group. And the way you identify with a certain group is obviously the way how you clothe, how you behave, and the music that goes with it. So it's more important for someone to have the music that goes with the group they identify with, to have those 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 songs on their phone for that week, because that's the hot stuff for that week. And the next week, especially in the beginning of when phones had limited memory capacity, those songs would be gone, and the other couple of songs which were important to the group would be on everybody's phone. So it's a much more disposable way of listening to music, also not collecting the actual music. And funny enough, where back in the day it was very hard and very expensive to buy proper equipment to play music in a proper quality, nice stereo system, nowadays a lot of the music is enjoyed on the mono speaker of a phone. So it's not even important to listen to the music in stereo. And a lot of the people that have iPhones now don't even realize that if you play a song on your iPhone, that it actually is playing in stereo from both speakers. They don't even know what stereo is. So it's a different way of consuming the music. And for yourself, like collecting music, I would obviously suggest collecting your music in an uncompressed format, and that doesn't have to be FLAC, because hard disks have become so cheap. Don't waste your time on making FLACs. The hard disks cost peanuts. Why would you spend time on coding and decoding FLAC files? No use. Internet has become so fast, you don't need to have anything in FLAC anymore. Just have it as uncompressed wave or uncompressed AIFF. That would be it. And your collection will grow. And as your collection grows, your hard disk will become full. So you filled up your 3 terabyte disk. Now you buy your 4 terabyte disk, copy everything over onto a fresh disk, put your 3 terabyte disk in the cupboard. And when that 4 terabyte disk gets full, buy your 6 terabyte and put the 4 terabyte in your cupboard so you have a backup. And then that way you can build all your collection. If you want to do it properly, you'll have a second disc, which has all your music as well. So you have a safety copy. And if you want to have it really properly, you will have a third disc which is not even in your house. So you have your main disc, you have your copy disc, and then you have a copy which is off the premises, that if anything happens here, you'll still have the disc which has all your favorite music and your photos and all your other stuff at a friend.
So where do you source your music from? Because I think that's also part of the Mitchell's question. So where do you find new music these days? Like where do you find new stuff?
I find my new, say for all the dance classics, I just about have everything that there is to be had. And when we come up with a new edition of Grand 12 inches, then obviously there'll be another little twirl on if I can find those masters in even better quality. So the dance classic department is just about covered with everything. And with my in the house shows, there is a Canadian service called Zip DJ. And Zip DJ is like, you'd have to look it up. It's like, I don't know, somewhere $50 or something like that. And that gives you access to all the music that is provided there by the record companies as promotional versions. And it's any service like Apple, they'll have their royalty system, which sends back the money to all the record companies and the artists. And Zip DJ has that as well. And on Zip DJ, I can just look for house music, deep house, whatever genre I want, and it will give me all the new releases. And I quickly listen through all the releases, and they are downloaded in 320 kilobyte per second MP3. So it's not uncompressed, but the quality is very good for this, for what I'm using it for. And I do have to open a door here because my cat lets me know that she wants out.
Yeah. So Mitchell, did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does answer my question. And surprisingly enough, I didn't expect tips from an old school DJ to be like, hey, you have hard drives and download them. I went back to CDs. I send all my Discog finds to my parents, and when they visit, they bring a stack of CDs because it's easy transportable and it's just hard to find.
Oh, right. Yeah. And the other funny thing is that here's the thing. For example, when I do Grand 12 inches, I try to find the best masters there is. I have my masters. I have masters that are sent by the record company, but there can always be someone who has some rare Japanese pressing that has an extended version or a longer version or a cleaner sounding version than I have myself. So basically, if I need a master, it's quicker for me just to put a post on Facebook and people start sending me WAV files than I would actually go into my boxes with the CDs. And by now all the CDs that are important are already on my system in WAV file, uncompressed as uncompressed WAV files, and but that backup system, have your main backup, have a copy, and then have offsite copies, and preferably in a way that you can update those remotely. And actually, at this moment, I'm also working with a very good friend of mine to have that done, so I can have my offsite copy of everything as well.
Cool. And Renee just raised his hands. So Renee, what's your question?
What question do you have, Renee?
Don't you know a thing about Ben already?
So I learned something today. I didn't know about the page called Librand.com Inspired, and I was just reading through that. But that page is only the tip of the iceberg, because I know so many other DJs, even younger DJs like Martin Garrix, who's literally said to you on one of the shows in Calgary, like, oh, and this is the guy that inspired me, and I played his CDs way back, right? And that's one of the younger DJs from Holland. Yeah. And so just the old farts, or the oude garde, as we say in Dutch, right? The other thing too, Ben mentioned that we've been organizing parties in Calgary, and we would get, most of our audience would be people just coming out for a good night. But there were always one or two or three people when you say, I know Ben, I followed him all my life. This is such a treat to get them seen play here in such a smaller venue. and stuff like that, because they know that Ben plays for way larger venues back in Holland. And so even myself as a I used to be a DJ, non-mixing DJ, I might add, back in the 70s and 80s, doing school parties. But we were aware of what Ben was doing, and we were big fans of what he was doing. And just it is so much wider than that. And so I almost want to call him the grandpa of DJ from the Netherlands.
Make it Godfather.
I know.
Godfather. So talk about this. Are you guys coming back to Calgary for a party?
Inspiring people.
We actually were on January of this year. We were back in Calgary, and we did a gig. But we now have to find the ideal getting there, flying back and forth, staying there, and because having to fly from the island to Calgary, it is another level of complication, because we can't. Renee would normally go to the venue, make sure that all the equipment is up and running, all the lights are up and running, but to do that from a distance, that's become a little bit more difficult. So I'm hoping that in time we'll be able to have a set here that we can basically also do gigs here on the island, because I found that also in Calgary. Mitchell, you are in Calgary right now?
Yes, I am.
Yes. So what we found in Calgary, Calgary is cowboy country. It is. But the music we were playing with all the tracks that we have that I put in the set, and Renee was also DJing on these evenings. The people know these tracks. If you go into a big store here in Canada, and you hear a selection of music which is being played on the background, it'll be a lot of dance classics, which you also hear. So they know the music. But it was a bit of a challenge to get a disco night, because that's what it is. It's a proper disco night. Get a disco night going in Calgary, but we managed to pull it off. And I'm absolutely sure that it would also work on the island here. And the very first time I did a disco set in Canada was at the Holland Heineken House at the Winter Olympics in 2010. And I had my case, and back then it was CDs. I had my case filled with CDs, and they were playing Black Eyed Peas, What a Feeling, every 15 minutes. And they were playing very corny tracks, and they were playing rock tracks, and they were playing Dutch tracks, with Dutch lyrics. And I was like, oh, this is going fantastic. I don't have rock. I don't have Black Eyed Peas. I don't have the corny stuff. And I don't have tracks with Dutch lyrics. What the hell? I'll just get started and see where it takes me. And it was the best night at the Holland Heineken House of all the nights. So I know it works. And the beautiful thing we've noticed in Calgary is that obviously we are aiming at people of around my age in the beginning, but as these nights became more popular, we were also gathering a whole young audience of 20 plus girls and guys who were dancing their asses off on disco music, where I'm absolutely 100% convinced they had no idea what the artist was or what the song was called, but they were so into the vibe that they were just having the time of their lives. So
that's awesome. So I
have a little side story that actually ties in perfectly with what you say, that the appetite is there. They just don't understand. They don't get it. I was at Sunshine Village. It was a spring day skiing. They had the stage set up there. There was a band playing, young kids in their 20s, blues band. Nothing wrong with these kids. Their blues was great. It was impeccable. We were sitting there. That's not what I wanted to hear. So I went down. We went away. In the parking lot, there was an older guy, late 40s, playing disco in house. I was like, if this guy was upstairs, I was still spending money at Trappers. I just don't get it.
Yeah, that's tough. So Art, you had a question there. Sorry.
Yeah, do you archive your own, let's say, shows, and do you ever listen back yourself?
Yes.
you make?
Yes. And with In the Mix, obviously I know all the tracks, but on my phone I have all the episodes of In the House. I have all my mini mixes, and also a lot of the time what happens is that, for example, if I'm doing a mini mix, at the end of the day, time is just up. Time has run out, and it's time to upload the mixes. And then a day later, I'm like, oh, that conga line could have been better, and that could have been better. Oh, and if I would have changed this with that, and I'll do that. I'll make a new version. I'll make a version, 2.0 or 3.0, and I'll make a new version, and some of those appear on Disco Mix Club. And I do listen to them myself, especially with the In the House episodes, because it takes a lot of vocals which and they are put on different tracks with different chord progressions in them. Obviously they need to fit, but it's great to hear how a different chord progression suddenly brings a song, gives a song a new life, gives these vocals a new life with what's happening between the melodies that are sung, and suddenly this different chord progression which is going on. And it's I love these surprises. And when I'm done with my mix, I render a version without all the jingles, and they go on my phone.
All right, hey, Harry, you got a question?
Yeah, you hear a lot of stories nowadays in the music scene about stems.
Stems, yes.
Yeah, can you explain a little bit how that works?
Yeah, there are a couple of misconceptions. So, for example, stems, and the other one that people are talking about, edits, whilst they actually mean a complete remix. But basically, probably they are not aware of what originally an edit means. So edit was just the editing in a tape, and calling a complete remix an edit, that's like, I don't know. That's I don't know. It's just crazy how that came to be, that misuse of that description. So when it comes to stems, there is also a lot of confusion. Normally, when you have a multi-track back in the day, and it would be a 24-track multi-track analog tape, 2-inch wide tape, which has so much room that you have room for 24 record, 24 playback heads, to have 24 different tracks, so that you have the drums and the vocals and the bass lines and the backing vocals all on separate tracks without any effect or reverb. And then you have all these 24 tracks on your mixing desk. You make a mix, and that will be the mix. And then if you day later you decide like, that mix really sucked because we made it way too late and our ears were tired, we have to redo that mix, then you make a remix. That's where the word remix comes from. Go back to the original multi-track, make a different balance of everything that's on there, which is the remix. In a later year, it meant adding even more stuff. Anyways, you're remixing these 24 tracks. Now there are some people that call these 24 tracks stems, which is a new name that is invented for something which already had a name, namely 24 tracks on a multi-track. And it's called a multi-track and not a multi-stem. So anyways, there's the confusion there. Basically, I would say the difference between a multi-track and stems is that the multi-track is the actual multi-track, is the actual original parts being recorded, and each of these things you can solo and play without hearing any of the other parts. And the other thing which is happening now is that, say for games like Rock Band and that kind of stuff, where you have, in Rock Band, you have the option to have the drums, have the bass, have the chords, have the vocals. So it'll be just like 4 or maybe 5 different things. One will have all the drums, so you can't have the drum, the snare drum, and the hi-hat separate because they are all pre-mixed. Then you have all the bass guitar and guitars mixed in a stereo. Then you have all the vocals mixed, lead in the middle, and then, you know, a bit stereo for the backing vocals. And so that group will then be called a stem, and that stem will contain all the drums. That stem will be a stereo mix of all the guitars. That stem will be a stereo mix of all the pianos and strings. And so you're talking about a group of already stuff which is already been mixed together. And that stuff has been made for games like GarageBand for many years. And now you also have software that is able, with artificial intelligence, to extract the vocal parts and extract the drums and extract the bass and extract the rest of the instruments in 4 different groups. And those are also called stems. So I'm referring to those kind of pre-mixed groups as stems, and the original multitrack is the original multitrack because it's been called like that for decades. And why would you name it something different now? So that's the difference.
Awesome. So I got one last, because I think we should start slowly wind down. I got one last question for you. So I know you're on Dutch radio quite a bit. I know you do mini mix and stuff like that. What's the best spot for people to follow what you're putting out? Like, what's the best spot to listen to your latest mixes and things like that? Do you have a channel somewhere?
Well,
or
the thing is with my radio shows, I prefer my radio shows to be on the radio stations that run my radio shows, which means that if I would put in the mix and in the house also on a stream, then people would not go and listen to the radio stations. And if they don't listen to the radio stations, the listening polls for my shows would go down.
Makes sense.
And the radio stations would justifiably see my shows as not being relevant because they are listened to in other spots. So I try to keep my shows on the radio stations where they are featured, and then maybe afterwards I'll post stuff on Vimeo. But initially, the radio stations that support me are the places where people should hear the mixes. And I know that there are people that put all their stuff on SoundCloud, and yeah, I don't know. It's like internet fame. You'll have your SoundCloud fame, and I don't exactly know how much that is worth. And I know that for other people, like Armin did fantastically with this State of Trance show, and he's really built a brand with his State of Trance shows. And the State of Trance shows are a platform not only for himself, but for all his colleagues, which he loves and promotes. And that obviously, that is a big, wide foundation for all the trance stuff that's going on and all the festivals that are going on. So that has earned a whole different level of value. So
yeah, awesome.
Listening to the stuff on the radio and all the other stuff, I try to announce on my Facebook page and on the Librand.com website.
Awesome. And then Renee just posted in the chat here the shows on Radio 10, where your mini mixes and your other mixes are featured. So apparently they're available as podcasts. So I'll definitely check those out. Thanks for that, Renee. That information. That's awesome. Last round. Asking any last questions, guys? Any last thoughts before we thank Ben for an amazing webinar? No?
I was just comparing here when it comes to old school and OG DJs. I see the resemblance not only in birth year but also in appearance with Sven Futt. You guys are 4 years apart.
I would have to look up. I would have to look up his latest picture. I don't know what he looks like, but yeah. Let's just say that all that hair was getting away getting in the way of acoustics.
I like that explanation. Harry, you got a last question.
Yeah, if I look on Facebook, I got so many sites that's using your name in it. Are they all real, or is there a lot of stuff that's illegal? That's bootlegs, or what is the story about it?
Here's the thing. I have my Facebook page, and I know that there are a lot of other people that obviously are big fans, and they have started their own Facebook pages. And I really feel that I really appreciate all my fans, and I can really understand their enthusiasm for loving the stuff I love. Sometimes what happens on these pages is that stuff is being posted which are illegal copies, and if somebody does that, within a couple of minutes somebody notifies me and says like, hey, something's going on that page which isn't okay. And it really isn't okay, because through those kind of illegal downloads, that was the cause that the Grandmix has lost its supporting foundation. The sales go down and down and down, up to the point where record companies don't want to put in the effort anymore to support a release of the Grandmix, because they know it's not going to bring them any substantial amounts anymore. And then you lose the cooperation of the record companies, and then the Grandmix ends. And the Grandmix has ended because of all the illegal copies. As sad as it sounds, but it's the truth. And so I am aware, and I want to prevent those illegal copies, but I don't want to get into the way of people's enthusiasm for the music I love and the stuff I do. So I'd rather have some annoyance occasionally than that I want to put my foot down and prevent other people from enjoying the music I love as well.
On top of that, it'd be a day job probably. It'll take a lot of your time.
Also, yeah.
Yep. Time better
But
spent.
all the people that are listening this, all the people that are hearing this and have their own Ben Liebrand kind of whatever page, treat the music with respect, and it goes for me and it goes for everybody else. If you love certain things, if you love certain music, if you love the place where you get your favorite food, if you love the place that makes your specific kind of clothes, support them. Because if you don't support them, then it goes for anything and everyone. So it's very important to do that.
Totally great. Well, really wise parting words there, Ben. I want to thank you so much for your time and for all the great stuff, great stories you told us. Thanks to everybody for joining our webinar, especially you from deep in the night in Europe. Really appreciate it. Hardcore fans there. Thanks again for all the members everybody in our community joining us. We'll be having more Dutch expertise webinars. Not necessarily likely about dance music. Well, we don't know that many famous DJs, but thanks so much, Dan, for doing this to us and for us. And we'll talk soon. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.